Good afternoon, distinguished chair, respected scholars, conference organizers, fellow presenters, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, I am very pleased to honored to participate in the 23rd International Conference on Sustainable Development on 2026. So I would like to sincerely thank Ontario International Development Agency for accepting my abstract and for giving me this valuable opportunity to present and publish my research through this international academic platform. I also appreciate the opportunity to present this research in collaboration with the International Multidisciplinary Studies Center of the Faculty of Humanities and Social Sciences, University of Sri Jayewardenepura. I am Reverend Dr. Pinnawala Sangasumana, Professor in Geography at the University of Sri Jayewardenepura, Sri Lanka. Today, my presentation is titled A Buddhist Framework for Dignity-Driven Sustainable Development Strategies. The main argument of this study is that sustainable development should not be understood only through economic growth, technological advancement, infrastructure development, or material progress. These are certainly important, but they are not sufficient to create a just and meaningful society. Development must also protect human dignity, promote ethical responsibility, strengthen social harmony, and maintain ecological balance. Therefore, this research attempts to examine how Buddhist ethical principles can help us rethink sustainable development in a more humane, compassionate, and dignity-centered way. Moving to the introduction, human dignity refers to the intrinsic worth of every person. I will repeat, the human dignity refers to the intrinsic worth of every person. It means that every individual has the right to live with respect, equality, freedom, and social recognition. Sustainable development, on the other hand, the second part of this, aims to meet the needs of present generation without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. Therefore, dignity and sustainable development are deeply interconnected. Development becomes meaningful only when it helps people live with respect, security, and well-being. However, in many contemporary development models, priority is often given to economic growth, technological and material progress. Ethical, spiritual, and dignity-centered concerns are often created as secondary. This has resulted in many problems such as inequality, exclusion, environmental degradation, and weakening of moral responsibility. In this context, Buddhist ethics provide a valuable foundation. Therefore, the research problem of this study is that although human dignity is highly important in sustainable development, it is often weakly integrated into development policy and practice. Many development approaches focus mainly on economic and technological progress while neglecting ethical responsibility, inclusion, and spiritual well-being. This imbalance can deepen inequality, social exclusion, and ecological degradation. At the same time, Buddhist ethics offer a holistic perspective, but their application to modern sustainable development framework remains limited and under research. Therefore, there is a need for structured framework that can connect Buddhist principles, human dignity, and sustainable development in both theory and practice. This research responds to that gap by developing a Buddhist ethical framework for dignity-driven sustainable development strategies. So these are the objectives of the research. I will not take time to explain more and more. To develop an integrated Buddhist ethical framework that explains how human dignity can be strengthened as a foundation of sustainable development through literature analysis, that is one part of the research, and the cross-case study analysis of the selected Buddhist-inspired development practices as a general objective. And there are some specific objectives in order to achieve this general objective as designed. So coming to the methodology, this research follows a qualitative, interpretive, and interdisciplinary approach. It is not based on statistical measurement alone. Instead, it uses textual interpretation, documentary analysis, thematic analysis, and cross-case comparison to understand the relationship between Buddhist ethics, human dignity, and sustainable development. So the main data sources include Buddhist texts, academic literature, policy documents, and sustainable development goals related reports and case study materials. So under the methodology, this slide explains the three-tiered structure of the study. This structure is organized into three levels: knowing, applying, and understanding. The first level is knowing. At this level, the study conceptualizes human dignity. The output of this stage is a clear understanding of the key dimension of human dignity. The second level is applying, field of application. At this stage, the study relates human dignity to practical fields of sustainable development. The third level is understanding. This stage integrates Buddhist ethical principles into development thinking. It compares Buddhist principles with contemporary development challenges and identifies how Buddhist ethics can provide practical recommendations. The output is this level is an ethical framework and practical guidance for policymakers, practitioners, and communities. So these are the instruments and methods shows how the research was carried out. Documentary analysis is used to examine Buddhist scriptures, philosophical text, academic literature, and policy documents and SDG reports. Hermeneutic analysis is used to interpret Buddhist teachings, and case study analysis is used to examine selected Buddhist-inspired development practices. Comparative and thematic analysis is often used to identify recurring ethical themes, similarities, differences, and cross-case findings. Now, in this part of this presentation, I discussed the first section of the results and discussion, which is based mainly on textual and literature-based analysis. The literature review of this study was organized around three more major focal points. First, it examined the concept of human dignity. Second, it explored the relationship between human dignity and sustainable development. And third, it analyzed Buddhist ethical principles as a possible foundation for dignity-driven sustainable development strategies. These are the three, as you see in this slide. And also, the first finding of that human dignity is not a simple or single-dimensional concept. It includes intrinsic worth, autonomy, respect, equality, empathy, social recognition, integrity, freedom, justice, solidarity, and spirituality. The literature shows that dignity is not only a legal or political idea, but also an ethical, social, and spiritual foundation for human well-being. From a Buddhist perspective, dignity is also connected with moral development, self-discipline, and potential for ethical transformation. The second finding is that human dignity and sustainable development are deeply interconnected. They are interconnected. Sustainable development cannot be achieved if people are excluded from different decent works, education, healthcare, social recognition, environmental security, and justice. So the literature identifies several important areas where dignity becomes practically relevant, as you see: economic dignity, education and healthcare, right and governance, social inclusion, environmental stewardship, and cultural and interfaith harmony, so on and so forth. The third finding comes from the Buddhist ethical analysis. Buddhist principles such as non-harm, compassion and loving kindness, mindfulness and self-control, middle path, and also interdependence. And in addition, the healthcare also that can be considered in this analysis. The literature shows that dignity is not only a legal or political idea. So these principles encourage us to rethink development as a moral and relational process. Development should not be driven by greed, excessive consumption, or competition alone. It should promote well-being, compassion, social justice, and ecological balance. The fourth finding is that Buddhist ethics help to overcome some illustrations of conventional development models. So, however, overall, that literature-based analysis shows that Buddhist ethics can enrich sustainable development by adding ethical depth, spiritual meaning, and ecological responsibility. It proves that the theoretical foundation for the next part of this presentation, as I started now, case studies and cross-case analytical findings. As mentioned earlier, I selected 6 countries for this analysis. In addition to these country-based cases, I also considered the recent global peace walk led by a group of monks, very popular in the world, as a contemporary case study of Buddhist peace building in public practice. The empirical evidence for this path was collected through several sources. I used literature and documentary materials, but I also depended on my personal academic and religious engagements. Since 2009, I have regularly attended the United Nations Vesak Day conferences, and I will also attend the forthcoming Vesak conference in Wuxi, China, where I am presenting a paper started from this May 2025. During these international meetings, I had opportunities to meet Buddhist monks, scholars, and practitioners from different Buddhist traditions. Through informal discussion and exchanges, especially with Buddhist monks and leaders from the selected countries, I was able to collect valuable insights into how Buddhist principles are applied in real social, environmental, and development context. In this slide, I present the selected case studies used to understand different forms of Buddhist engagement with dignity-driven sustainable development. I also included the recent Global Peace Walk as a contemporary example of Buddhist public action. In Sri Lanka, you can see the Sarvodayas, Ramadana forest monasteries, and Umandava global village concept, and also India and Bhutan, Vietnam, China and Japan. There are several projects and movements I considered as case studies to and I have founded the main focuses and some important concepts related to the human dignity and sustainable development. This slide summarizes the main cross-case analytical findings emerging from these cases. The first finding is that Buddhist ethics humanize development. These cases show that development should not be limited to income, infrastructure, technology, and economic growth. The second finding is participation and empowerment. And the third finding is the relevance of middle path development. For example, Bhutan's gross national happiness, Sri Lankan forest monasteries, and Umandava global village all show the value of moderation, simple living, responsible consumption, and balanced growth. This provides an alternative to excessive consumerism and purely growth-centered development models. The fourth finding is, you can see the ecological responsibility. And the fifth, compassion in public practice. The sixth finding is peace and reconciliation. Overall, the seventh finding is, the overall finding is that Buddhist ethics have global relevance. Across all these cases, Buddhist principles offer a practical ethical framework for dignity-centered, inclusive, peaceful, and sustainable development. Therefore, this study argues that sustainable development should be guided not only by economic and political indicators, but also by compassion, moderation, ecological responsibility, and peace and respect for human dignity. In conclusion, this study demonstrates that Buddhist ethics provide a comprehensive and practical foundation for dignity-driven, sustainable development. By adopting Buddhist principles such as ahimsa, karuna, metta, upekha, sila, sati, Majjhima Patipada, and Paticcasamuppada, development strategies can become more ethically grounded and socially meaningful. These principles encourage policymakers and practitioners to promote inclusive governance, responsible economic systems, environmental protection, social welfare, and peace building. A key finding of this study is that Buddhist ethics shift development thinking from excessive consumption and profit-oriented growth toward well-being, social harmony, and environmental balance. The middle path provides a balanced approach between overconsumption and deprivation, while interdependence reminds us that human well-being, society, and nature are deeply connected, as number 5 says. Therefore, this study concludes that integrating Buddhist ethical principles into governance, economic planning, and social development can create a more compassionate, inclusive, and sustainable world where human dignity and ecological balance remain at the center of progress. Thank you very much for hearing me.